it's Annette Cluett, and today I'm going to show you how to use Fusion Regional Disaster Recovery with Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management to do application failover and then failback. So let's look at our architecture here and how we have it set up. So the word regional is meant to be between regions. And in this case, we're going to have an OpenShift cluster at what we call region 1 and another OpenShift cluster at region 2. In the case of the advanced cluster management, it will probably be on another cluster so that you have the ability to fail over. The data is being replicated between the two clusters using Fusion Data Foundation. And we can see that this will enable us to do a failover and a failback automation at the level of an application. And this is all orchestrated by Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management. So let's go ahead and see how this would actually work. So in Advanced Cluster Management, I'm in the console right now. And you can see that I've already imported two clusters, two OpenShift clusters. I have one named Cluster 1 and another one named Cluster 2. So that is already set up for us. And I've also connected the two clusters using something called Submariner, which is supported by Advanced Cluster Management. So the first thing I want to do so that we have an application to use is I want to install an application using Advanced Cluster Management. So let's go to Applications, and I'm going to create an application. I'm going to use something called an application set. Application sets are a component of Argo CD, and they're supported by OpenShift GitOps, which I have installed on the same cluster where I have Advanced Cluster Management. So I'm going to call my application Robot Shop, and you'll see why when we get to play with the application. I'm going to select my Argo CD server, and then I have a Helm chart which I have packaged, and I've called that Robot Shop. I do need, though, to also select where the Helm chart is. So that's my fork, Netzer github.io/Helm chart. And the package version that I want to use is 1.4.0. Now, when the application is deployed on either cluster 1 or cluster 2, I'm going to need a namespace for it to be in, and I'm going to call that Robot Shop as well. So then we'll go next. Take the defaults here. So we're going to use a new placement to decide where the application will go. And then I'm going to add a label to select one of them. So we'll use the label of name. And then we'll select the value cluster 1. So I'm going to put it on cluster 1. And then we'll go ahead and hit next and then submit. So that's as easy as it is to create an application via Argo CD. So we'll watch the topology a little bit here. We can see it's coming up. We will be also able to see it on the cluster once it starts being populated. So we can go over here, and this is actually cluster 1, and I'm looking at a topology view. And you can see that Robot Shop has a lot of different components, microservices. It, in particular, is using MySQL and MongoDB. And so that is what we're going to use for saving the data and then being able to see that we have the data after we fail over to a new cluster. So let's see how we're doing here on the deployment. Looks like it's almost done. So now that it's finished, we can actually log into the application and see what it looks like. So the route is here, and I can go ahead and launch that. I have already actually put it into a tab up here, so let's go there. And the application was not running, so let's refresh, and here we are. So I'm going to log in to Stan's Robot Shop and use the default credentials, user and password. Let's log in. So we'll see here that we have multiple robots that we can actually rate and buy. So let's start by looking at Stan, and we'll go ahead and give Stan a 5, and then we'll add Stan to the cart. And we also like Watson, so we'll give Watson a 3 and add Watson to the cart. So now let's go ahead and check out. You can do that by selecting the cart up here. Go to checkout, and let's get a country. How about India? I'm gonna ship it to India. And how about Bangalore? Okay, then this will calculate the shipping, confirm, and pay. So now we've got our order. So we've now created persistent data that MongoDB and MySQL are storing into their database. And through Fusion Data Foundation, we're saving the data into persistent volumes that are going to be replicated to the failover cluster. So to do that, to start that process of replication, we now need to assign a DR policy. So in the same Advanced Cluster Management console, we can go to Data Services. We can go to Data Policies. We have a data policy here that's already been created. It's between Cluster 1 and Cluster 2, and the replication interval, every 5 minutes, the data is going to be replicated between clusters. So let's go ahead and assign this to Robot Shop. So we can do that here. We then need to add a label, app equals Robot Shop. And then we'll save that. As soon as we do that, the data that we saved, the order and the rating of the robots, is being saved, and then at the replication interval, it will be copied over from cluster 1 to cluster 2. So we're going to just wait a little bit here, and then we'll do a failover to see if that actually works. In the meantime, let me just show you the Argo CD interface. And we can see that we do have our Robot Shop in here. And in the settings, in the way that I configured Advanced Cluster Management, I imported the clusters, Cluster 1 and Cluster 2, as possible placement locations for the application. So that's how the integration of Argo CD and Advanced Cluster Management is being done. So let's look at our data policy here. Now that we have assigned that, we can go down to Applications, and we'll see now that we do have a data policy. And currently, the data policy says that we have not done either a failover or a relocate yet. Okay, I think it's been long enough now. So let's get out of this and let's go to failover the application. We can see that everything is already filled out. We have our DR policy. We have the target cluster that we want to go to. Right now we're on cluster 1. We want to go to cluster 2. So we'll go ahead and initiate. And we can watch this in a couple different ways. So let's go back to our policy. And we can see that the failover status is completed. So let's go back to our topology. So now we can see that we're starting to create new resources on the failover cluster, cluster 2. And in a short time here, we should be complete. We can also look at cluster 2. Remember, cluster 1 is here, and now all the resources are gone, but we can go to cluster 2 and make it a little bit easier to see. And now we can see that the components or the services are being created on cluster 2. So let's go back to our topology. So we can select the cluster in the middle here, and we can see now that we are running on cluster 2. So to take a look at the data and see if we saved our order and our ratings, we need to go to the route for cluster 2. And we could launch it here, or I've already put it into a tab up here. Refresh here, and we're back to the application on the new cluster. So let's log in. With user and password. And right away, we can see our order that we're shipping to India. Let's go ahead and check to see if we have our robot ratings. So we'll look at Stan. So it said that we rated Stan 5 and Watson 3. So we definitely have been able to keep the data, and we have failed over to a new cluster, and we're ready now to continue on this cluster with the application. So this shows that you can definitely fail over on a per application basis. Now, if you need to move the application back to the original cluster after the issue is resolved, or you just want to move it back, you can use something called Relocate. Let's add something new. So let's go down to the second robot here. Looks like a good guy. And we'll give him a vote of 4, and we'll add him to the cart. Then we'll go ahead and check out again to do a new order. So I'll check out, and let's see here. How about let's send him to Finland, to Helsinki, calculate that, confirm it, and pay now. Okay, so we have rated a new robot, and we've ordered the robot. Now let's go back to Advanced Cluster Management. And we can see now that we're still on cluster 2. Let's go ahead and do now disaster recovery dashboard. So here's the new dashboard. The top part shows you the status of the disaster recovery operators and the cluster operators. We can see that in our case, we just have 2 clusters and 1 application. To the right, we have alerts that'll fire if something goes wrong with the replication of any single volume. And then down a bit here, we have more information about the applications. If I go to cluster 2, I can go to Robot Shop, and it'll show me the last time that there was a replication, as well as it'll tell me the last activity, which we know we failed over to cluster 2, and that we currently don't have any issues. In addition to that, it'll show us the health of the volumes. So let's go back to starting a relocate. And I'll just reselect the application here. So right now the policy shows that we are complete on failover and we have not initiated a relocate. So we can go ahead and go down to relocate, which is very similar. One of the main differences for relocate is that it assumes that both clusters are in a healthy state and you just want to move the application back. Whereas failover, our first operation, the cluster that you're failing from could be completely offline. It truly is, if you need it to be, a disaster recovery capability. So let's initiate this. And then again, we can watch it in multiple places. One thing we can do first is look at the topology and see how that's going. And right now it looks like we're still on cluster 2, so it'll take a little while to do the relocate. So we can see that there's some changes now. Let's go and look at the topology. So on cluster 2, where we did have robot shop, there's nothing now. On cluster 1, we see the microservices and MongoDB and MySQL are now deployed. So let's go back to our topology. So we're just waiting now on a few of the deployments to finish. And if we look at our cluster, we see that we are back to cluster 1. Looks like we're all green now. So we've gone back to the original cluster and the route is here. I have it up in a tab. Okay, so we're here at cluster 1. Let's go ahead and log in as our user. Password. Okay, and now we see that in addition to our order for Stan and Watson, we have ordered an additional robot. And if we go to that robot that we ordered, we can see now that the rating that we gave the robot is right here. So this is new data that we added after the failover before the relocate. So in summary, I've showed you how to use Fusion Data Foundation with OpenShift and Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management to be able to do a user interface-based failover and relocate of a microservices application. Thank you for watching my video and hope to see you next time.